So the early access for No More Room in Hell 2 just dropped, and the Steam reviews are not looking that good. And I guess the million-dollar question is this warranted? Sort of. Let me explain. I can understand where the majority of them are coming from, as the sequel has taken different directions with their gameplay as opposed to the original. And not all of this is bad. I actually think there's a lot of good aspects of this game, which we'll get into right now. For starters, I think the melee combat is one of the best parts in this game, as it just has so much oomph to it when you hit someone with a bat or a lead pipe. It actually feels like those weapons rather than a limp dick noodle or something. Now, there is one negative thing that I want to mention, and I'll talk about this in detail more later in the video, but in regards to the melee combat, there are some glitches in the game that really hinder this experience. I can't even count how many times I've whacked a zombie on the top of his head, and instead of getting an animation of him standing up, it just pops him up, and it just startles the shit out of me as he attacks me, and it really comes off janky, and it ruins a little bit of the immersion. Now, another great mechanic that they added is the characters and how each of them have their own individual traits that you could take into a match with. And as you're collecting things and you get extracted, you can take all that into another match and so on and so forth, up until you die. And once you die, you lose everything. You have to pick a whole new character again. And I think this really does wonders for the replayability, as each character specializes in a specific thing, changing the ways you would go about certain situations in each match. And this is just my bias here, but I find shooter extractions one of the most naturally replayable genres that I've ever experienced. I personally could play shooter extractions for hours upon hours. And speaking about the replayability, I do think No More Room in Hell 2 offers a level of replayability for all of its players. But as I will discuss soon, there is one decision that the devs made that really damages this replayability. But the last thing I want to quickly mention before we get into the negatives is the atmosphere of the game. And honest to God, I think this is probably one of the best parts besides the melee. I think that this is one of the only things that the sequel captured well from the original, as everything is so dark and gloomy. There are noise cues that are a little bit creepy. The environment, especially indoors, feels tight and claustrophobic, etc., etc. Now, before I get into the things I dislike, let me just knock this out of the way. There are tons and tons of glitches, ranging from invisible bodies with floating heads, all the way to flashlights not appearing in the hand and it's just showing the light out of the weapon. And the worst one, in my opinion, was the invisible walls. I can't even tell you how many times I almost got hoed by just running into nothing and getting stuck. And I know, this is probably all gonna get patched up in a later update, but I really do get sick and tired to a certain extent on almost game-breaking glitches. Even for early access, I think that's a little much. I can deal with a few bugs here and there, but there is a limit. Now, earlier on, I said that this game, for the most part, has decent replayability, and I do mean that, but there is one aspect that I wish they would address better, and that is the objectives throughout the match. Now, I don't think this is entirely bad, especially earlier on, but towards the end of the game, at least for all my playthroughs, the objective remains the same, which sucks. I don't know what else to say. It really just hurts the replayability because of how boring it gets towards the end. I mean, don't get it twisted. There's still a horde of zombies. There's still a lot of things you have to deal with, but having it consistently be the same at the end of every match gets old. Another thing that I find boring is the variety of zombies, or a better way to put it, a lack of variety of zombies, because they're all the goddamn same. Which really sucks because the original had different zombies. I remember the little children zombies that would run and just slap the shit out of my knee. I just don't understand why they don't incorporate some things from the original like that. Which leads me to my final criticism, and honestly, probably the main reason why this game has gotten completely terrible reviews on Steam. And that is the different direction that this game has gone in, especially in comparison to the original. The first No More Room in Hell is a very interesting game. Its mechanics are janky, stiff, unforgiving, not to mention it has subpar graphics for even 2011 standards. Yet, I don't know how to say this next part without coming off like a pretentious douchebag, so I'm just gonna say it. All these things that I mentioned, plus certain mechanics that I will mention in a second, combine to make this very charming, quirky game that is just fun to play. And I'm not even a die-hard No More Room in Hell fan. I personally like Left 4 Dead 2 more, but I can really admire what these players enjoy. All the mechanics that the devs chose contribute into this brutal reality. For example, you literally have a key that you can hit to, let me say this without getting demonetized, unalive yourself. You can literally choose to unalive yourself. That is that is crazy. And there's just so much mechanics that contribute to this feeling of dread. Like, for example, in the original, there's much less ammo to work with as opposed to the second one. And this lack of ammo forces you to use melee weapons to survive, as opposed to No More Room in Hell 2, which using melee weapons is an option towards the end of the match. You more or less can rely on your guns with how much ammo you have. Not to mention certain mechanics like being infected, which you can get by just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And you also had to keep track of that by certain indicators like the veins popping up at the side of your screens, because that was another aspect of the original where they had lack of hub, which this sequel kind of has that too, but not as much as the original. And I also mentioned this earlier on, but the variety of zombies in the original, they had zombie children, and all of this combines to have such, like I said before, a quirky game, a charming, quirky game that I can understand the frustrations of diehard fans for not having these certain things. But all in all, is this game worth buying? Well, if you're one of the diehard fans that I just mentioned, probably not. But if you're someone that liked No More Room in Hell and you just like zombie genres in general, then maybe you should give this a try. Maybe wait a little bit for patch updates and things of that nature, but all in all, I think it is somewhat worth a buy later down the line. But all in all, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, comment below what I should do next. I can do anime, shows, movies, games, whatever. But again, thank you so much for watching.